Welcome back, everybody. Ready for another deep dive?
Always excited to dive in.
Awesome. So this time, we're going to be looking at Exodus, chapter 16.
Exodus 16, okay.
Yeah, the story of the manna and the quail.
Ah, classic.
Right. Probably heard the story before, but
Oh, yeah.
we're going to unearth some pretty interesting details you might have missed.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's not just about food, right?
Right.
It's about, testing faith, establishing these patterns of rest, and even thinking about the logistics of...
Logistics, yeah.
Yeah, feeding a massive group of people who are wandering in the wilderness.
It's quite a feat, isn't it? I mean, you think about it, this is a pivotal moment in the Israelites' journey.
Oh, yeah.
And what's so fascinating is how this seemingly simple story about food,
Right.
it really speaks volumes about their relationship with God and their capacity for trust.
Absolutely, yeah. So, okay, let's set the scene here.
Okay.
The Israelites, they've just escaped centuries of slavery in Egypt.
Imagine.
I know. They're making their way through this, unforgiving desert, and
right.
I mean, they're pretty stressed.
Understandably so.
Yeah, can you imagine?
Yeah, and that stress kind of boils over into complaining.
Yeah.
It's almost ironic they start reminiscing about the quote-unquote good old days in Egypt, longing for the food, even though they were enslaved. It really highlights
Oh, for sure.
how change can be tough, even when it's a change for the better.
Oh, I can relate to that.
Right.
Yeah, that feeling of wanting to go back to something familiar, even when you know it wasn't all that great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this complaining, it wasn't just venting frustration.
Yeah.
It was a test of their faith.
It really was, yeah.
God had just delivered them from slavery, but could they trust him to provide for their needs?
Yeah.
In this new and uncertain situation?
Right.
Their grumbling, it showed a lack of faith.
Yeah.
And God could have easily gotten angry and said, go back to Egypt then. Right.
But instead, he responds with a solution that's both practical and profound.
Yeah.
He promises to provide food,
cool.
quail in the evening, and a mysterious substance called manna in the morning.
Okay, so this manna, it's described as thin and flaky.
Yes, thin flaky.
Appearing with the morning dew, and get this.
Yeah.
The Israelites had no idea what it was.
What is this?
Yeah, they even asked, what is it? Which is manhu in Hebrew.
Yeah.
Hence the name manna.
Excellent.
It's just they're just handed this unknown food source.
Right.
I think I'd be a mix of curious, terrified, and probably just too hungry to care.
Probably too hungry, you're right.
Yeah.
But it emphasizes just how dependent they were on God at this point.
Right.
This wasn't just about providing sustenance.
Yeah.
It was about teaching them to rely on him.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how God didn't just give them a mountain of manna and say, figure it out.
Right.
He gave specific instructions for gathering it. Right.
Creating a system of provision.
Yes.
With very clear rules.
Okay, so what were the rules?
So they were to gather enough for each person in their household, and absolutely no hoarding allowed.
Oh.
It was a system designed to ensure fairness,
Right.
where everyone got what they needed,
Okay.
regardless of how much or how little they gathered.
I see, but there were consequences for those who didn't follow the rules, right?
Absolutely. Some tried to be clever, tried to save extra manna for later, but it spoiled.
Oh, wow.
It became infested with worms and started to stink.
Oh, yuck.
This wasn't just about following arbitrary rules.
Right.
It was a lesson in trusting God's provision.
Yeah.
And understanding that he would provide enough for each day.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that saying.
What's that?
Man plans, God laughs.
Right.
Yeah, but, this story,
Yeah.
it goes beyond just food and obedience.
It does, yeah.
It also introduces this concept of the Sabbath rest, which, became a cornerstone of the Israelites' faith.
Absolutely, that's right. God commanded a day of rest, no manna gathering on the seventh day,
Okay.
but to ensure they had enough.
Yeah.
He provided a double portion on the sixth day.
So even in providing for their needs, he was still testing them.
Yeah, it was a test.
Yeah.
Would they resist the urge to gather manna on the Sabbath?
Right.
Even if they saw others doing it.
Yeah, this idea of resting.
Yeah.
And trusting that God will provide, even when we're not actively, working for it.
Yes.
It's a test we still face today.
A timeless test.
Yeah, it's so easy to get caught in that cycle of constant work and striving.
Absolutely.
That we forget the importance of rest.
Right.
But that Sabbath principle,
yeah,
it reminds us to prioritize it.
Yes.
And have faith that God will provide.
Exactly. And this manna, it was more than just food. right?
Yeah, it was a powerful symbol, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Manna represented God's faithfulness and his unwavering commitment to provide for his people, even in the most challenging circumstances,
Yeah.
to drive that point home.
Okay.
They were instructed to preserve an omer of manna.
An omer.
An omer, a specific measurement,
Okay.
as a reminder for future generations.
Wow, that's incredible. A physical reminder of God's provision passed down through generations.
Powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, it makes you wonder, what serves as that kind of reminder in our own lives?
Yeah, what are those things?
Yeah, what are the things that make God's faithfulness tangible for us?
Good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we need those reminders to, ground us, especially when things get tough.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of tough,
Yeah.
the Israelites weren't just dealing with, a short-term manna situation, right?
Right, yeah.
They ate manna for 40 years.
Wow.
Their entire journey through the wilderness.
Really?
Until they reached the promised land.
40 years of mysterious bread from heaven. I imagine they might have gotten a little tired of it after a while.
You would think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But think about the trust that must have built over those 40 years.
Yeah.
Every morning, fresh manna appeared.
Yeah.
A tangible reminder of God's faithfulness.
Right.
It's almost like a daily affirmation.
Uh-uh.
Wake up, gather manna, and be reminded that God is providing.
Yeah.
What a way to strengthen their faith.
Wow, yeah. And it wasn't just manna, right?
Yeah. No.
God provided meat for them, too,
He did.
every evening in the form of quail.
Quail, that's right.
Yeah, it's easy to, focus just on the manna.
Yeah,
But that dual provision, both bread and meat,
right.
it speaks to, the completeness of God's care for them.
Yeah, it's like God was saying, I'm not just keeping you alive.
Yeah.
I'm ensuring you have a balanced diet here in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
And imagine the logistics of it all.
Oh, my God.
We're talking millions of people
Yeah.
wandering through the wilderness. To provide enough quail every evening for that many people,
Yeah.
it's simply mind-boggling.
It's incredible. And it wasn't just, a leisurely stroll through the desert either.
No.
They were traveling, setting up camp, breaking it down again.
Right, constantly on the move.
Yeah, day after day. It must have been exhausting.
Absolutely. And through it all,
Yeah.
God was providing,
Yeah.
sustaining them, both
Yeah.
physically and spiritually.
Yeah.
It's a powerful message of hope and resilience,
For sure.
even in the face of seemingly impossible circumstances.
Yeah. So how does this story, translate for us thousands of years later?
Right.
I mean, we're not exactly wandering through a literal desert hoping for manna to rain down.
True. But the themes of provision,
Yeah.
testing, and trust,
Yeah.
they're timeless.
They are.
The Israelites' journey, it challenges us to examine our own relationship
Okay.
with dependence and provision.
Okay.
What are our, deserts, you know?
Yeah.
Where are we tempted to doubt or complain? Forgetting that God is ultimately the provider.
It's so easy, I think,
Yeah.
to romanticize the Israelites' story.
Yeah.
We think, if only I had those clear signs
Right.
of God's provision,
Yeah.
then my faith would be unshakable.
Then I would know.
Yeah.
But maybe we're missing the point.
Maybe we are.
Perhaps the challenge lies in recognizing God's provision in our everyday lives,
Right.
even when it's not as dramatic as manna raining from the sky.
Yeah, so true.
Maybe it's a job that appears when you need it most, or a
Right.
kind word from a friend,
Yeah.
or a moment of peace amidst chaos.
Yeah, so instead of asking, where's my manna?
Right.
Maybe we should be asking,
Yeah.
how is God providing for me right now?
Exactly. And how are we responding to that provision?
Yeah.
Are we hoarding it like some of the Israelites did?
Uh-huh.
Or are we sharing it generously,
Right.
trusting that there's always enough to go around?
Yeah.
And what about that Sabbath principle?
Right.
Are we prioritizing rest as God commanded?
It's hard.
It is hard.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught in that always on,
Yes.
always hustling mentality.
Yeah.
Maybe that's our modern day test of faith.
Maybe so.
Can we truly rest,
Yeah.
trusting that God will provide even when we're not actively striving?
Wow. That's a good point.
All important questions to consider.
Yeah.
The story of manna, it isn't just ancient history. It's a living invitation
Yeah.
to explore our own experiences
Yeah.
of faith, provision, and dependence on God.
This deep dive has been so insightful.
It has, hasn't it?
Yeah, we've, unpacked the Israelites' complaints. We've explored the miracle of manna
Yeah.
and even delved into the significance of the Sabbath rest.
Right.
But there's one more aspect to this story I find particularly fascinating. The symbolism of manna.
Yes, the manna was much more than just food.
Yeah.
It represented something far deeper.
Exactly. It feels like we're getting to the heart of it now.
Yeah.
What does manna look like in the 21st century?
Right.
How do we even recognize God's provision in our modern world?
Yeah.
It's so easy to get stuck on that image
Yeah.
of this literal food that appeared out of thin air.
Right. Right.
But maybe we need to look beyond that.
Exactly. We need to broaden our understanding of what manna could represent.
Okay.
Remember, the Israelites were in dire straits.
Yeah.
I mean, they were lost, hungry, and their faith was wavering.
Yeah.
Manna was an answer to their prayers.
Right.
A tangible sign that God was with them.
Yeah.
Providing for their needs.
So maybe manna today
Yeah.
could be anything that sustains us.
Right.
Anything that gives us hope and reminds us that we're not alone
Yeah, absolutely.
in struggles.
Precisely. It could be a supportive community,
Mm-hmm.
a sense of purpose,
Yeah.
even access to clean water or health care.
Yeah.
Things that might seem ordinary to some,
Right.
but for someone in need, they can be absolutely life-changing, like manna in the desert.
Like manna in the desert. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point. It's interesting, though, because just like the manna came with specific instructions, these forms of modern-day provision, they often require us to, to use them wisely and share them with others.
That's such a crucial point.
Yeah.
We're called to be good stewards of whatever manna we receive. Whether it's material resources, talents, or opportunities.
It's about recognizing the gifts we've been given.
Right, exactly.
And then using them to make a positive impact on the world around us.
That's it.
This whole conversation has really shifted my perspective.
Good.
I'm starting to see, manna everywhere.
I love that.
The kindness of strangers.
Yeah.
The beauty of nature.
Yeah.
Those unexpected moments of joy that kind of catch you by surprise.
And that's the beauty of it all, isn't it?
Yeah.
God's provision. It's woven into the fabric of our lives, often in the simplest, most unexpected places.
Yeah.
It's up to us to open our eyes, our hearts, and our minds to recognize it and respond with gratitude and generosity.
Wow. Okay, so there you have it.
There you go.
Our deep dive into Exodus 16 has taken us from, the grumbling of the Israelites to the miracle of manna. We've explored the timeless lessons of trust, provision, and rest.
And maybe the most important takeaway is that this story isn't just ancient history.
Right.
It's a living invitation to discover how God is providing for us today, even in the midst of our own personal deserts.
Yeah, so as you go about your week, keep your eyes peeled for those moments of manna in your life.
Right.
And think about how you can be a source of provision for others.
Beautiful.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.
Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.